Sarah Martinez had always been different from other girls her age. While her classmates worried about homework and weekend plans, she spent her free time studying military tactics and practicing combat moves in her backyard. Her dream was simple but bold. She wanted to become a Navy SEAL, even though no woman had ever completed the training successfully. Growing up in a small coastal town in California, Sarah was raised by her grandmother after her parents died in a car accident when she was 12. Her grandmother, Rosa, was a tough woman who had worked as a nurse during the Vietnam War. She taught Sarah that being strong wasn't just about physical power, but about mental toughness and never giving up, no matter how hard things got. Sarah's journey to the SEALs began in high school when she joined the swim team and the wrestling club. Her coaches noticed something special about her. She had an unusual ability to push through pain and exhaustion that would stop most people. During practice, when other swimmers would slow down or take breaks, Sarah would keep going, her strokes steady and powerful even when her muscles screamed in protest. The other students didn't always understand her dedication. Some made fun of her intense training schedule and her dream of joining an elite military unit that had never accepted women. They called her crazy and said she was wasting her time. But Sarah ignored the negative comments and focused on her goals. She knew that proving herself would require more than just physical strength. After graduating high school with top grades, Sarah enlisted in the Navy. Her first years of service were spent proving that she belonged. She excelled in every training program, from basic combat skills to advanced underwater operations. Her instructors were impressed by her determination and skill, but they also warned her that SEAL training would be unlike anything she had experienced before. When the opportunity finally came to attempt SEAL training, Sarah was ready. She had spent years preparing her body and mind for the challenge. The selection process was brutal, designed to weed out all but the most exceptional candidates. Out of hundreds of applicants, only a small number would be chosen to begin the actual training program. The initial weeks of SEAL training tested every aspect of Sarah's preparation. The physical demands were extreme, with candidates running for miles in soft sand, swimming in cold ocean water for hours, and carrying heavy equipment across difficult terrain. The mental pressure was just as intense, with instructors constantly pushing candidates to their breaking points to see who would quit. Sarah's fellow trainees were initially skeptical about having a woman in their group. Most had never trained alongside a female candidate before, and some doubted whether she could keep up with the demanding pace. However, Sarah quickly proved herself by matching or exceeding the performance of her male counterparts in most exercises. Her swimming skills were particularly impressive, often finishing ahead of candidates who had been swimming competitively for years. The training took place at a military facility near the ocean, where candidates faced challenges designed to simulate real combat situations. They learned to work as a team while also being evaluated as individuals. Every day brought new tests of endurance, skill, and mental toughness. Candidates who couldn't meet the standards were removed from the program, and the group grew smaller each week. One of the most challenging aspects of the training was the underwater demolition exercises. Candidates had to learn to work efficiently while holding their breath for extended periods, often in dark or murky water where visibility was limited. Sarah's years of swim training gave her an advantage, but the military techniques required learning entirely new skills and approaches to underwater operations. The instructors were tough but fair, pushing every candidate to discover their limits and then go beyond them. They created scenarios that tested not just physical ability, but also decision-making under pressure, and the ability to work effectively as part of a team. Sarah found that her analytical mind, developed through years of studying military tactics, helped her excel in the strategic aspects of the training. As the weeks passed, Sarah began to earn the respect of her fellow candidates. They saw that she never complained about the difficult conditions and always volunteered for the most challenging assignments. Her positive attitude and determination helped boost morale during the toughest moments when other candidates were considering quitting. The training facility became Sarah's world, with little contact with the outside except for brief phone calls home to her grandmother. Rosa always encouraged her to keep going, reminding her that she was pursuing her dream and proving that barriers could be broken with enough determination and hard work. During one particularly difficult week, the candidates faced a series of tests that combined multiple skills they had learned. They had to navigate through obstacle courses while carrying heavy packs, then immediately transition to underwater exercises, followed by written tests on tactics and strategy. Several candidates dropped out during this period, unable to handle the combined physical and mental demands. Sarah not only survived this challenging week, but emerged as one of the top performers in her group. The instructors began to take notice of her consistent excellence across all areas of training. However, she knew that the most difficult challenges were still ahead, and that making it through the initial phases was just the beginning of proving she belonged among the elite special forces. The other candidates had begun to see Sarah as a valuable team member rather than just the woman who was trying to break barriers. They recognized that her skills and determination made their whole group stronger, and several admitted that training alongside her had made them work harder and perform better than they might have otherwise. As Sarah prepared for the next phase of her training, she reflected on how far she had come from that small coastal town, where people said her dreams were impossible. She thought about her grandmother's words about strength and perseverance, and she knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, she was ready to face them. The girl who had once been told she could never become a SEAL was well on her way to proving everyone wrong. The advanced phase of SEAL training brought challenges that pushed Sarah and her remaining teammates to their absolute limits. The group had shrunk from over 200 candidates to just 37, and the pressure was mounting daily. Each exercise was designed to test not just their individual capabilities, but their ability to function as a cohesive unit under extreme stress. Sarah had earned her place among the top performers, but she knew that some of her instructors still harbored doubts about whether a woman could complete the full program. She could see it in their eyes during evaluations and hear it in the subtle comments they made when they thought she wasn't listening. This only fueled her determination to prove them wrong. The training facility had become her entire world. Days began before dawn with intense physical conditioning, followed by specialized skill training that included everything from advanced weapons handling to complex navigation exercises. The candidates learned to operate in complete darkness, using only their training and instincts to complete missions that would challenge even experienced soldiers. One of the most demanding aspects of this phase was the mountain training exercises. The candidates were transported to a remote mountainous region where they faced challenges that combined rock climbing, survival skills, and tactical operations. The terrain was unforgiving, with steep cliffs, unpredictable weather, and limited resources for completing their assigned missions. During one particularly challenging exercise, Sarah's team was tasked with reaching a specific location on a cliff face to retrieve intelligence materials, then escape through a predetermined route while avoiding simulated enemy forces. The exercise was designed to test their rope climbing skills, tactical awareness, and ability to work together under pressure. Sarah's team consisted of 5 candidates, each with different strengths and specializations. There was Marcus, a former college football player whose physical strength made him excellent at carrying heavy equipment. David was a former Marine who brought valuable combat experience to the group. James had grown up rock climbing and was their natural leader for any vertical operations. Finally, there was Antonio, whose background in electronics made him their go-to person for technical challenges. The morning of the exercise dawned cold and overcast, with a thick fog rolling through the mountains that reduced visibility to just a few yards. The instructors briefed them on their mission and emphasized that this exercise would be a significant factor in determining who would continue to the final phase of training. Failure was not an option for anyone who wanted to become a SEAL. As they approached the cliff face, Sarah could feel the tension in her team. The rock wall stretched up into the fog, making it impossible to see their final destination. The instructors had provided them with standard climbing equipment, but they would need to rely on their training and teamwork to navigate the challenging terrain successfully. James took the lead in planning their approach, using his climbing experience to identify the best route up the cliff. Sarah studied the rock face carefully, noticing details that others might miss. Her analytical mind helped her spot potential problems and alternative routes that could save time if their primary plan encountered difficulties. The climb began smoothly, with each team member taking turns leading different sections based on their individual strengths. Sarah found herself enjoying the physical challenge and the mental focus required to navigate the complex route. Her years of training had prepared her well for this type of demanding exercise. However, as they climbed higher, the weather began to deteriorate. The fog grew thicker, and a light rain started to fall, making the rock surface slippery and more dangerous. What had begun as a challenging but manageable exercise was quickly becoming a test of survival skills as much as tactical ability. About halfway up the cliff, they encountered their first major obstacle. A section of the rock face was too smooth and steep to climb safely with their current equipment. James suggested they traverse horizontally to find an alternative route, but this would cost valuable time and energy that they might need for the descent and escape phase of the exercise. Sarah proposed a different approach. She had noticed a narrow ledge system that could provide an alternative route, but it would require precise movements and complete trust between team members. The ledge was barely wide enough for one person, and had significant exposure to a dangerous fall if anyone made a mistake. After discussing the options, the team decided to attempt Sarah's route. They roped together for safety and began the delicate traverse across the narrow ledge. Sarah volunteered to go first, testing each step carefully and calling back information about safe hand and footholds to her teammates. The ledge traverse required extreme concentration and physical control. One wrong step could result in a fall that would endanger the entire team. Sarah moved slowly and deliberately, her training taking over as she navigated the challenging terrain. Behind her, she could hear her teammates breathing heavily as they followed her path. As they neared the end of the ledge traverse, disaster struck. A section of rock that had appeared solid suddenly gave way under Antonio's weight. He slipped and fell, his safety rope immediately going taut as the team's belay system engaged. However, the sudden shock load caused a cascade of problems that put everyone in immediate danger. The force of Antonio's fall pulled the entire team off balance. Marcus, who was serving as the anchor point, was dragged toward the edge of the ledge. David and James scrambled to help stabilize the situation, but the narrow ledge left little room for maneuvering. In the chaos, Sarah found herself in the most precarious position, barely maintaining her grip on the wet rock. What happened next would later become a subject of intense investigation and controversy. As Sarah struggled to maintain her position and help her team deal with the emergency, she felt someone grab her climbing harness. Instead of helping to stabilize her position, however, she felt herself being pushed away from the rock face. The sensation was unmistakable. This wasn't an accident or a result of the chaotic rescue situation. Someone had deliberately shoved her off the ledge. As she fell into the fog-shrouded void below, Sarah's mind raced to understand what had just happened. In the few seconds of free fall before her safety systems engaged, she realized that her biggest challenge in becoming a SEAL might not be the training exercises or physical demands, but the people who didn't want her to succeed. The fall seemed to last forever, though Sarah knew it was only seconds before her safety rope would catch her. As she plummeted through the thick fog, her SEAL training kicked in automatically. Instead of panicking, her mind became crystal clear, analyzing the situation and preparing for what would come next. She had been pushed deliberately, and now she had to survive both the immediate danger and whatever else her attackers had planned. When the rope finally caught her, Sarah experienced a violent jolt that sent pain shooting through her ribs and shoulders. She found herself dangling against the cliff face, disoriented but alive. Above her, she could hear shouting and confusion as her teammates dealt with the aftermath of what they believed was an accident. The fog was so thick that they couldn't see her position clearly. "Sarah, are you okay?" James's voice echoed down from somewhere above. Strained with concern and the effort of managing multiple emergency situations simultaneously. "I'm alive," she called back, though her voice was weaker than she would have liked. She quickly assessed her physical condition and found that while she was bruised and shaken, nothing seemed to be seriously injured. Her years of physical conditioning had prepared her body to absorb impacts that might have severely hurt someone with less training. What concerned her more than her physical state was the realization that someone on her team had tried to kill her. The push had been unmistakable, deliberate, and timed perfectly to take advantage of the chaotic situation. But who had done it and why? She had thought these men had come to respect her abilities and accept her as part of their team. As she hung on the rope, Sarah began to piece together what must have happened. The timing of Antonio's fall, which had seemed like bad luck, now appeared suspicious. If someone had wanted to create a situation where they could eliminate her while making it look like an accident, the ledge traverse would have been the perfect opportunity. "We're going to pull you up," Marcus called down. Just hang tight. But Sarah's training told her that wasn't the safest option. If someone on her team wanted her dead, allowing them to control her rescue might give them another opportunity to finish what they had started. She needed to take control of her own situation and get to safety using her own skills and resources. Negative, she called back up. The rope position is wrong for a safe ascent. I'm going to self-rescue and meet you at the rally point. There was a moment of silence from above before David's voice responded. Are you sure? That's a long way down and visibility is terrible. Sarah was sure. Her SEAL training had taught her to be self-reliant and never to depend entirely on others for her survival. More importantly, her instincts told her that her greatest danger right now came from the people above her, not the cliff below. Using techniques she had learned during her extensive training, Sarah began to rappel down the cliff face. The fog made navigation extremely difficult, but she used her other senses to guide her descent. She listened for sounds that would indicate obstacles or changes in the terrain, and used her hands to feel the rock surface for clues about safe routes. The descent was nerve-wracking but manageable. Sarah's countless hours of rope training had prepared her for exactly this type of situation. She moved steadily downward, controlling her speed and direction with the precision that had made her one of the top candidates in her training class. As she descended, Sarah's mind worked to solve the puzzle of who had pushed her and why. Antonio's fall could have been an accident, but the timing was too convenient. Someone had either caused his fall deliberately or taken advantage of the chaos it created. The question was whether this was the action of one person or if multiple team members were involved in trying to eliminate her. When she finally reached the bottom of the cliff, Sarah found herself in a small clearing surrounded by dense forest. The fog was somewhat thinner at ground level, giving her better visibility to assess her situation. She was alone, several miles from the designated rally point, with limited equipment and no communication with her team or the instructors. This was exactly the type of survival scenario that SEAL training was designed to prepare candidates for. But Sarah knew this was no longer just an exercise. Someone had tried to kill her, and she had to assume they might try again. Her priority now was to reach safety while avoiding whoever had pushed her. Sarah took inventory of her equipment and resources. She had her basic survival gear, a limited amount of water and emergency food, and her training to rely on. The fog would provide concealment but also made navigation more difficult. She needed to reach the rally point to complete the exercise officially, but she also needed to stay alive. As she began moving through the forest toward the rally point, Sarah reflected on the events that had led to this moment. She had worked so hard to prove herself worthy of being a SEAL, only to discover that some people would rather see her dead than successful. But this challenge was just another test, and she was determined to pass it just as she had passed all the others. The forest was thick and difficult to navigate, especially with limited visibility. Sarah used her compass and map reading skills to maintain her bearing toward the rally point, while staying alert for any signs of pursuit. She moved quietly and carefully, using techniques she had learned for operating in hostile territory. After several hours of careful movement through the forest, Sarah began to hear voices in the distance. As she got closer, she recognized the voices of her teammates and the instructors. They had reached the rally point and were discussing what had happened on the cliff. Sarah positioned herself where she could listen without being seen, wanting to understand the situation before revealing herself. It was just an accident, she heard Marcus saying. Everything happened so fast during Antonio's fall. Sarah probably just lost her grip in all the confusion. Her rope work during the descent was flawless, one of the instructors noted. If she was really hurt or disoriented, she wouldn't have been able to self-rescue that effectively. Maybe she's tougher than we thought, James added, though Sarah detected something in his tone that made her cautious about revealing herself immediately. As she listened to the conversation, Sarah realized that whoever had pushed her was doing an excellent job of acting innocent. They were all expressing appropriate concern for her safety and surprise at her ability to handle the emergency. But one of these men had deliberately tried to kill her, and until she knew which one, she couldn't trust any of them completely. Sarah remained hidden in the forest, observing her teammates and instructors from a concealed position. Her SEAL training had taught her the value of gathering intelligence before taking action, and right now she needed to understand exactly what she was dealing with. Someone had tried to kill her, but she still didn't know who or why. As she watched and listened, Sarah began to notice subtle details that she had missed before. The way Marcus avoided making eye contact when discussing the accident, how David kept checking his watch as if he was expecting something to happen. The fact that James seemed more concerned about the timeline of the exercise than about her safety. The instructors were clearly suspicious about what had happened on the cliff. Sergeant Rodriguez, the lead instructor, was asking pointed questions about the sequence of events and the team's safety procedures. Sarah could tell that her self-rescue had impressed them, but also raised questions about why she had chosen that option instead of accepting help from her teammates. Martinez should have been here an hour ago, Sergeant Rodriguez said, checking his own watch. Even with the self-rescue, the timeline doesn't add up unless she encountered additional problems. Sarah realized this was her opportunity to test her theory about who had pushed her. If she revealed herself now and watched carefully, she might be able to identify her attacker by their reaction. Someone who had tried to kill her would be surprised and possibly alarmed to see her arrive safely. She moved quietly through the forest until she was approaching the rally point from the expected direction. Then she deliberately made some noise to announce her arrival, stepping into the clearing where the group was gathered. "Sorry I'm late," she called out, watching each face carefully for reactions. The descent took longer than expected in this fog. The responses were exactly what she had hoped to see. Most of her teammates showed genuine relief and concern, asking about her condition and expressing admiration for her successful self-rescue. But one person's reaction was different. For just a moment, David's face showed something that looked more like disappointment than relief. Sergeant Rodriguez immediately began questioning Sarah about her descent and the timeline of events. She answered honestly, describing her route and the challenges she had faced, but she didn't mention her suspicions about being pushed deliberately. That information was too dangerous to share until she had more evidence and could be sure of who to trust. "Your self-rescue was textbook perfect," the instructor noted, "but I'm curious about your decision to refuse assistance from your team. That's not standard protocol for this type of situation." Sarah had prepared for this question during her journey through the forest. "The rope angles were wrong for a safe team rescue in those conditions, Sergeant. My position in the fog made it too dangerous for the others to attempt a complex extraction. Self-rescue was the safer option for everyone involved." The explanation was technically accurate and demonstrated the kind of tactical thinking that instructors looked for in SEAL candidates. But Sarah could see that David was studying her face carefully, as if trying to determine how much she really knew about what had happened on the cliff. The exercise continued with a series of tactical challenges designed to test the team's ability to work together under pressure. Sarah participated fully but remained alert for any signs that someone might try to harm her again. She made sure never to be alone with any single team member and positioned herself carefully during high-risk activities. During a nighttime navigation exercise, Sarah's suspicions about David were confirmed. The team had been divided into pairs for a compass and map-reading challenge through difficult terrain in complete darkness. Sarah found herself paired with Antonio, while David was working with Marcus, and James worked alone as an odd man out. About halfway through the exercise, Sarah heard movement in the forest that didn't match the expected sounds of her teammates completing their navigation routes. Someone was moving stealthily, trying to avoid detection, and the direction suggested they were tracking her and Antonio, rather than following their assigned route. Sarah quietly alerted Antonio to the situation, using hand signals they had learned during their stealth training. Together they altered their route and set up a position where they could observe whoever was following them. After 20 minutes of patient waiting, they saw David moving carefully through the forest, clearly tracking their path rather than following his assigned route. Antonio was confused by David's behavior, but Sarah understood immediately. David was looking for another opportunity to eliminate her, probably planning to make it look like she had gotten lost or injured during the navigation exercise. The isolated forest at night would provide the perfect cover for making her disappearance appear accidental. Instead of confronting David directly, Sarah decided to use his tactics against him. She and Antonio quietly moved to a position where they could follow David without being detected. If he was planning to harm her, she wanted to gather evidence that would prove his intentions to the instructors. David's movements through the forest confirmed Sarah's suspicions. He wasn't following his assigned navigation route at all. Instead, he was systematically searching for Sarah's team, using skills that suggested he had been planning this for some time. His movements were too purposeful and informed to be the result of simply getting lost during the exercise. As they watched David search for them, Sarah realized that this probably wasn't his first attempt to eliminate a candidate he saw as undesirable. His techniques were too sophisticated, and his planning too thorough for this to be a spur-of-the-moment decision. She began to wonder if other candidates had faced similar accidents during previous training cycles. The implications were disturbing. If David had been systematically eliminating candidates he didn't think belonged in the SEAL program, how many others had been hurt or killed? And more importantly, was he acting alone, or was this part of a larger conspiracy to keep women and other undesirable candidates out of the elite special forces? Sarah decided that she had enough evidence to take action. David's behavior during both the cliff incident and the current tracking activity clearly showed malicious intent. But she also knew that she needed to handle the situation carefully. If she simply accused him without overwhelming proof, it would be his word against hers, and the investigation might drag on long enough to derail her chance of completing SEAL training. Instead, Sarah chose to use her SEAL skills to turn the tables on David. If he wanted to play predator and prey in the forest, she would show him what it meant to be hunted by someone with superior training and motivation. It was time for the hunter to become the hunted. She signaled to Antonio to remain in their concealed position while she moved to intercept David. Her plan was to capture him in the act of attempting to harm her, providing undeniable evidence of his intentions. More importantly, she wanted to send a clear message that Navy SEALs don't rely on ropes or the help of others when their survival is threatened. They rely on their own skills, training, and determination to overcome any obstacle, including enemies within their own ranks. Sarah moved through the dark forest like a shadow, using every stealth technique she had learned during her SEAL training. Years of preparation had honed her ability to move silently and remain undetected, skills that were now proving crucial for her survival. David might have experience eliminating unsuspecting candidates, but he had never faced someone who knew exactly what he was planning. The forest at night presented challenges that would have overwhelmed most people, but Sarah felt completely at home in the darkness. Her other senses became heightened as she tracked David's movements, listening for the subtle sounds that would reveal his position and intentions. She could hear him moving through the underbrush, still searching for her and Antonio with the confidence of someone who believed he held all the advantages. David had positioned himself near a steep ravine that cut through the forest, clearly hoping to create another accident that would eliminate Sarah permanently. The location was perfect for his purposes, isolated, dangerous, and far enough from the main exercise area that her disappearance might not be discovered until it was too late to determine what had really happened. But Sarah had anticipated his strategy. Instead of walking into his trap, she had circled around to approach him from behind. Her plan was simple but effective. Capture David in the act of attempting to harm her, then use her SEAL training to subdue him and bring him back to the instructors as evidence of what had been happening. As she got closer to David's position, Sarah could see that he was setting up what appeared to be a trap near the edge of the ravine. He had arranged some equipment and rope in a way that suggested he was planning to make it look like she had fallen accidentally while attempting to cross the dangerous terrain. The setup was sophisticated and would probably have fooled investigators if his plan had succeeded. Sarah realized that David's experience with eliminating candidates was even more extensive than she had suspected. The trap he was setting showed a level of planning and knowledge that could only have come from multiple previous attempts. She began to understand that she wasn't his first target, and she probably wouldn't be his last if she didn't stop him tonight. Moving with careful precision, Sarah positioned herself where she could observe David without being detected. She wanted to document exactly what he was doing, so that there would be no question about his intentions when she presented her evidence to the instructors. Her SEAL training had taught her the importance of gathering solid intelligence before taking action. David finished, setting up his trap, and then moved to a concealed position where he could wait for Sarah to approach. His patience and systematic approach confirmed that he had done this before. He wasn't acting out of sudden anger or frustration, but following a carefully planned methodology for eliminating candidates he didn't want in the SEAL program. Sarah decided it was time to turn the tables. Instead of waiting for David to make his move, She would force him to reveal his intentions by appearing to fall into his trap. But unlike his previous victims, she would be ready for whatever he had planned. She deliberately made some noise as she approached the ravine, making it sound like she was moving carelessly through the forest. David immediately became alert, adjusting his position to better observe her approach. Sarah could sense his excitement as he prepared to spring his trap on what he believed was an unsuspecting victim. As Sarah approached the area where David had set up his trap, she pretended to stumble and call out in apparent distress. "Hello, is anyone there? I think I'm lost." Her voice carried just the right amount of confusion and vulnerability to convince David that she was genuinely disoriented and walking into his trap. David emerged from his hiding place, putting on a show of concern and helpfulness. "Sarah, thank God I found you. You're way off the navigation route. This area is dangerous. There's a deep ravine just ahead." "I'm so glad you're here," Sarah replied, playing her role perfectly. "I got completely turned around in the darkness. Can you help me get back to the main route?" "Of course," David said, moving closer. "Just follow me. I know a safe way across this ravine that will get us back on track." But as David led her toward his carefully prepared trap, Sarah was ready. She had studied his setup and understood exactly what he was planning. When he moved to push her toward the edge of the ravine, she was prepared to counter his attack and turn his own tactics against him. The moment came when they reached the edge of the ravine. David positioned himself behind Sarah, ostensibly to guide her across the dangerous terrain, but actually to push her into the void. As his hands moved toward her back, Sarah spun around with lightning speed, grabbing his wrists and using his own momentum to throw him off balance. David's surprise was complete. He had expected to be dealing with a confused and vulnerable victim, not a highly trained Special Forces candidate who was ready for his attack. Before he could react, Sarah had reversed their positions, leaving him teetering on the edge of the ravine while she controlled his balance and safety. "Surprised?" Sarah asked, her voice calm and controlled despite the intensity of the situation. "Did you really think you could eliminate me as easily as you did the others?" David's face showed a mixture of shock, fear, and anger as he realized that his carefully planned attack had been turned against him. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "I know you pushed me off the cliff," Sarah continued, maintaining her grip on his arms while keeping him balanced precariously on the edge of the ravine. "I know you've been systematically eliminating candidates you don't think belong in the SEAL program. And I know you were planning to make my death look like an accident tonight." The evidence was overwhelming, and David's expression showed that he knew his deception had been discovered, but instead of showing remorse or fear, his face twisted with anger and hatred. "You don't belong here," he snarled. "Women have no place in the SEALs. I've worked too hard to get here to let some diversity experiment ruin everything I've worked for." Sarah understood now that David's actions weren't just about her. He represented a mindset that saw women and other non-traditional candidates as threats to be eliminated, rather than potential teammates to be evaluated fairly. His willingness to commit murder to preserve his vision of what the SEALs should be revealed the depth of his prejudice, and the danger he posed to anyone who didn't fit his narrow definition of acceptable. "The only experiment here is seeing if you can learn that Navy SEALs don't rely on ropes," Sarah said, preparing to demonstrate that her training and skills were more than adequate to handle threats both external and internal. "We rely on ourselves." With David balanced precariously on the edge of the ravine, Sarah faced a crucial decision. Her SEAL training had taught her to neutralize threats effectively, but it had also emphasized the importance of justice and protecting innocent people. David had tried to kill her and probably others, but she wasn't going to become a killer herself to stop him. Instead, Sarah used her superior position and training to subdue David safely. She pulled him back from the edge of the ravine and used techniques she had learned in hand-to-hand combat training to restrain him without causing serious injury. Within minutes, David was secured with his own rope and equipment, unable to escape or cause further harm. "You made one critical mistake," Sarah told him as she finished securing the restraints. "You assumed that because I'm a woman, I must be weaker or less capable than you. But SEAL training doesn't care about your gender. It only cares about your ability to complete the mission and protect your teammates." David struggled against his restraints, his face still twisted with anger and hatred. "This isn't over," he threatened. "Even if you expose me, there are others who think like I do. You'll never really be accepted." Sarah looked at him with a mixture of pity and determination. Maybe you're right that there are others who share your prejudices, but every time someone like me succeeds despite people like you, we prove that merit matters more than bias, and every time someone like you gets exposed and removed, the teams become stronger and more capable. With David secured, Sarah activated her emergency communication device to contact the instructors. Within an hour, Sergeant Rodriguez and a team of military police arrived at the scene. The evidence of David's trap and his subsequent confession under questioning quickly revealed the extent of his activities. The investigation that followed was thorough and shocking. David had been responsible for at least 3 accidental deaths of candidates during previous training cycles, along with several serious injuries that had ended promising military careers. His victims had included women, minorities, and anyone else he deemed unfit for the elite special forces based on his own prejudiced beliefs. The revelation sent shockwaves through the SEAL training community. Instructors who had previously attributed the high casualty rate to the demanding nature of the training now realized that they had been dealing with deliberate sabotage. Safety protocols were immediately reviewed and strengthened to prevent similar incidents in the future. For Sarah, David's exposure vindicated her decision to pursue her SEAL training, despite the obstacles and opposition she had faced. The investigation revealed that several instructors had suspected that something was wrong, but had lacked the evidence to take action. Her successful capture of David provided the proof they needed to clean up the program and ensure that all candidates were evaluated fairly based on their abilities rather than their demographics. The remaining weeks of SEAL training proceeded without incident. Sarah found that her teammates' attitudes toward her had completely changed. The men who had initially been skeptical about her presence now treated her with genuine respect and admiration. They had witnessed her courage, skill, and integrity under the most challenging circumstances possible. Antonio, who had been with her during the night navigation exercise, became one of her strongest supporters. He told anyone who would listen about how Sarah had protected him and exposed a dangerous threat to the entire program. Marcus and James, who had initially been neutral toward her presence, now openly acknowledged that she had proven herself worthy of being a SEAL through actions rather than just words. The instructor's perspective had also shifted dramatically. Sergeant Rodriguez later told Sarah that her handling of the David situation had demonstrated exactly the kind of tactical thinking, moral courage, and protective instincts that the SEAL program was designed to develop. She had identified a threat, gathered intelligence, developed a plan, and executed it flawlessly while protecting innocent people and gathering evidence for justice. When graduation day arrived, Sarah stood among the final group of candidates who had successfully completed one of the most demanding military training programs in the world. Out of the original 200 candidates who had started the program, only 18 remained. She was not only the first woman to complete SEAL training, but she had done so while uncovering and stopping a conspiracy that had been harming candidates for years. The graduation ceremony was attended by high-ranking military officials who had come specifically to witness this historic moment. Sarah's grandmother, Rosa, sat in the front row with tears of pride streaming down her face. The woman who had taught Sarah about strength and perseverance was watching her granddaughter break barriers that many people had thought were unbreakable. During the ceremony, Sarah received not only her SEAL qualification, but also a commendation for her actions in exposing David's criminal activities. The commendation recognized her courage, tactical excellence, and commitment to protecting her fellow candidates. It was an honor that none of the other graduates received, marking her achievement as truly exceptional. After the ceremony, Sergeant Rodriguez approached Sarah privately. "You know," he said, "when you first arrived here, some people wondered if having a woman in the program would lower our standards or create problems for unit cohesion. What you've proven is exactly the opposite. You've raised the standards by showing what's possible when someone refuses to accept limitations." Sarah's success opened doors for other women who wanted to pursue careers in special forces. Her example proved that the qualities needed to be an effective SEAL, mental toughness, physical capability, tactical intelligence, and unwavering determination, were not limited by gender. The program was reformed to ensure that all candidates would be evaluated fairly based on their abilities and character. Years later, Sarah would look back on her time in SEAL training as a defining period that taught her not just about military tactics, and physical endurance, but about the importance of standing up for what's right even when facing overwhelming opposition. The moment when David pushed her off the ledge had been intended to end her dreams and possibly her life. Instead, it had become the catalyst for proving that Navy SEALs don't rely on ropes or the approval of others for their success. They rely on their own skills, training, and determination to overcome any obstacle, whether it comes from enemy forces or from people within their own ranks who try to hold them back. Sarah had learned that being a true SEAL meant protecting not just your country, but also the principles of fairness and justice that make your country worth protecting. The girl from a small coastal town who had once been told her dreams were impossible had not only achieved them but had made it possible for others to follow in her footsteps. She had proven that barriers exist to be broken by people with enough courage and determination to refuse to accept them, and she had shown that sometimes the most important battles are fought not against foreign enemies, but against the prejudices and limitations that people try to impose on each other. Sarah Martinez had become the first female Navy SEAL, but more importantly, she had become a symbol of what's possible when someone refuses to let others define their limitations. Her legacy would inspire generations of future candidates who would know that their success would be determined by their abilities and character, not by the narrow-minded prejudices of people who couldn't see past their own biases.